So, today we're going to build one of the best gaming and content creation computers you can build today. Not the best, but certainly up there. To begin with, we have the i7-13700k with a set of 6200 MHz DDR5 memory. But we will start with the motherboard, and we have the Msi Z790 Tomahawk, and we think it's such a solid looking board. Not only that it always had the performance, it's also designed like a true sleeper, and we love that. Next up is the memory. And for those who don't know, if you connect only two sticks, always go for the furthest slot from the CPU for the first stick, leave a gap and then install your second stick. For the SSD, this is the Msi SPATIUM M450. And while installing it, you can see MSI went for a tool-less approach, and it's great to see more and more board manufacturers go with this feature. To cool the i7, we have the Msi CORELIQUID-K360-V2. This cooler has a gigantic block design that has a color LCD and a VRM cooling fan in it. Still, the pump and rad combo is basic Asetek design, and MSI went with a generic approach to its components, so you have no need for special hardware like Corsair, for example, that have all these connection boxes and whatnot. This means you have tons of wires to deal with, but it's manageable at the end. Another unique feature for this cooler are the fans. These fans are built like a tank, and the fan blades have a special half-ring design similar to what MSI uses on their GPUs, and this should help with static pressure and better cooling on radiators. Time for the case. This is the first time we hold an MSI case, and this is the Msi Velox 100p Airflow edition. It's a rather normal mid-tower chassis with focus on high airflow. It comes with a vertical mount adapter, which is nice to see, but no PCIe extension cable, which is less nice to see. And overall, this case seems a very well built case with lots of space wherever you need it. Although we didn't really like the design, we think it's a bit outdated with all the slots and grooves, but it's a matter of taste. For the power supply, we have the Msi A850GF. It's a fully modular PSU with 80+ gold rating, and sadly it doesn't include the new PCIe 4 connector, which we will obviously need because we're going with the RTX 4080, and we'll get to that in a second. After quickly installing the motherboard and the power supply in the case, it's time for the grand jewel of this build, the RTX 4080 Suprim X. Obviously, this gigantic card has a huge cooler, and while still very clean and premium looking, this time around MSI went with a tiny bit more edgy design. Still, I think this is one of the best looking 40 series cards in the market. And with that, this build is complete, and we're now running Doom Eternal on its highest settings with RT on in 1440p. And while this game is very well optimized, we get very high frame rates, above 300 FPS, which is amazing. And now, after we turned off ray tracing, we sit between 400 and 500 FPS, which is completely nuts and really feels like kind of a CPU bottleneck because it's not a huge gap from with ray tracing, but who really cares? It's above 400 FPS. This is crazy. And just for reference, this is the test we do on CSGO, and the results are pretty amazing. The 13700K reaches a 620 FPS average, which is even a bit or slightly higher than the 13900K that reached 612 FPS on average. So this is probably due to the thermal headroom, and yet this is a very impressive result for this CPU and GPU combo. Let me know if you can see 600 FPS in the comments. In Cinebench R23, the 13700K is showing a pretty great score. It's scoring above 13,000. It's not on par with the 13900K, but it's definitely showing the gaps between the 13900K and the 13600K. And compared to its direct competition, it's obviously crushing the Ryzen 9 79000X, and it's leading in about 2,000 points on that. And yeah, the other thing above that is matching the 13900K. And yeah, this is pretty much a great CPU for everything you're gonna throw at it. So just before we wrap up this build video, I would like to say a few notes on the build process. In this case, this is the Msi Velox 100p. It's a weird name, and honestly, most of the MSI peripherals have pretty weird names. I think you should work on that with your copywriters. But other than that, the case is pretty forward thinking. You have a lot of focus on the airflow of this case, and obviously the build process and where you put all the stuff. So compatibility with cooling and motherboard plus memory compatibility with the cooling, which is very important these days. And honestly, pretty straightforward and smooth sailing build process in this case. The one thing I really didn't kind of like is the appearance of the case. And yeah, you have a lot of RGB stuff going on in the front, on the side, like the PSU shroud, and everything looks really nice, but the design itself, all the cutouts and all the extrusions are pretty outdated in my opinion, and I think we could have a bit of a more subtle approach to design. But other than that, it's a pretty great case. And also I would like to emphasize how much I appreciate the design approach to the Suprim version of this GPU. The MSI Suprim really looked solid and amazing in the previous generation, but this time around it's even prettier. It has a little more edgy features like the RGB on the top and more RGB on the sides, but still it keeps a very classy look. And all in all, this was the build video and we really liked the results. The 13700K is an amazing CPU. The 4080 from MSI is an amazing GPU, no doubt about that. And this was an amazing build. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next video. Bye bye.